He thought he'd taken everything. He forgot about the one place that held all the secrets, the one place he never knew existed. What she found there wouldn't just be a second chance. It would be the truth she never knew she was missing. If you've ever felt like you've lost it all, hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. The room smelled of stale air and industrial-grade disinfectant, a scent that clung to the polyester bedspread and the thin, scratchy towels. It was the smell of rock bottom. For 2 weeks, this had been my world. A beige box on the second floor of a roadside motel, paid for with the last dregs of a joint account Marcus's lawyer had magnanimously forgotten to freeze immediately. The final divorce decree had arrived that morning. A thick, self-important envelope delivered by a courier who looked at me with a pity I couldn't stand. I hadn't opened it. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. It said I was free. It said I was homeless. It said I was nothing. I was staring at the water stains on the ceiling, trying to find shapes in them like they were clouds, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a quiet, respectable area code. Probably another debt collector Marcus had sicked on me, a final turn of the knife. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again. Same number. I sighed, the sound swallowed by the room's oppressive silence. Fine. Let's get it over with. Hello. My voice was hoarse. Is this Alara Vance? A woman asked. Her tone was calm, professional, and entirely devoid of the predatory glee I'd come to expect. It is. Who's this? My name is Catherine Albright. I was your father's attorney. The name dropped a stone in my stomach. My father. It had been 3 years since he'd died. A quiet, stubborn man who'd faded from a heart condition he refused to properly acknowledge. We'd had a complicated relationship, a landscape of things unsaid. Ah, yes. I remember the name from the estate paperwork. Is something wrong? Not wrong, no? Just unfinished business. I'm calling because something has come to my attention regarding your divorce settlement. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. A little late for that. The ink is dry. He got the house, the savings, the car. He even got the dog. There's nothing left to discuss. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the faint rustle of paper. That's not entirely accurate, Ms. Vance. In their asset discovery, Mr. Hayes's legal team was exceptionally thorough. They found investment accounts you didn't know you had, traced every dollar you ever earned. But they missed something, because it was never yours to begin with, not in a way they would look for. I sat up, the cheap springs of the mattress groaning in protest. What are you talking about? I'm talking about a piece of property, a defunct cider mill and the 17 acres it sits on, just outside a town called Sparrow Creek. Your father purchased it under a trust 20 years ago, with you named as the sole beneficiary upon his death. The deed transferred to you automatically. It was never a marital asset. It was never commingled. It was, legally speaking, invisible to your husband. Until now, Sparrow Creek. The name was a ghost on my tongue. We'd driven through places like that when I was a kid, my father quiet behind the wheel, looking at the rolling hills with a strange sadness in his eyes. A cider mill. It sounded like a joke. A derelict building? That's what I have left. From a tax perspective, it's a liability, Ms. Albright said, her voice still perfectly even. The structures are in disrepair. The land is uncultivated. Its assessed value is negligible, which is why they missed it. However, Mr. Hayes has apparently been made aware of its existence. His attorney contacted me this morning with an offer. They're calling it a goodwill gesture to help you get on your feet. $5,000 for you to sign over the deed. $5,000. It was an insult. It was also more money than I had to my name. It could pay for a real apartment deposit for a few months of life while I figured out what to do next. It was the smart choice. The sensible choice. Why would he want it? I asked, the question tasting like suspicion. Marcus never did anything out of goodwill. That's the question, isn't it? Ms. Albright said. He's a developer. My guess is he sees a future value in the land that isn't immediately apparent. Rezoning, a new highway project, who knows? But his claim to it is tenuous at best. The offer is a scare tactic. He wants you to take the quick, easy money because fighting him would cost more than the property is supposedly worth, she paused. The trust your father set up also included a small cash account. It was meant for property taxes and basic upkeep. It has just under $2,000 in it. It's not much, but it's yours. I can wire it to you. $2,000. A key. And a choice. I looked around the beige motel room, at the sealed envelope on the table. He had taken my past and my present. Now he was trying to buy my future for the price of a used car. A cold, quiet anger began to smolder in my chest, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd lost. It was the first thing that had felt like my own in months. "Don't wire it," I said, my voice clearer now. "Can you have it for me in cash? And I need the address. And the keys." "Ms. Vance," she said, a hint of caution in her voice. "Alara, are you sure? Going there, it might not be what you expect." "Nothing is what I expect anymore," I told her. "That's the one thing I can count on." The bus ride was a long, slow crawl out of the city's orbit, a reverse evolution from concrete and steel to asphalt, then to gravel, then to dirt. I sat with my forehead pressed against the cool, vibrating glass, watching the landscape bleed from gray to green. I had one duffel bag with the few clothes Marcus had let me take, a backpack with a water bottle and some stale crackers, and an envelope from Ms. Albright containing a set of old, heavy iron keys and a hand-drawn map photocopied so many times the lines were blurry. And the cash, tucked into my sock. The other passengers were a quiet collection of ghosts. An old woman with a worn Bible in her lap, a young man in a paint-splattered work shirt who smelled faintly of turpentine, a mother trying to quiet a restless child. We were all running from something or to something. Maybe both. My mind kept drifting back to my father. He'd been a quiet man, a mechanic who could listen to an engine and diagnose its soul. But with people, with me, he was all locked doors and guarded silences. After my mother left, it was just the two of us in a small house that always felt too empty. He worked, he came home, he read the paper, he went to bed. Love was there, I think, but it was a practical, unspoken thing, like ensuring the oil was changed in my first car or leaving a $20 bill on the kitchen counter for a school trip. He had hated Marcus. I saw that now. He never said it, not in so many words, but it was in the way he'd shake Marcus's hand, too firm, too long. It was in the way his eyes would go flat when Marcus talked about his latest acquisition, his latest victory. I'd thought it was disapproval of me, of my choice. I'd thought he didn't think I was good enough for a man so successful, so charming. But maybe he wasn't looking at me at all. Maybe he was looking right through Marcus, seeing the rot at his core. And I, blinded by the shine, had called it love. The bus wheezed to a stop at a crossroads marked by a single, blinking yellow light and a gas station whose pumps looked like museum pieces. Sparrow Creek, the driver called out, not bothering to turn around. This was it. I was the only one who got off. The air was different here. It was thick with the smell of damp earth, of pine needles, of approaching rain. The sky was a vast, bruised purple. There was no one around. The gas station was closed, a faded sorry sign taped to the inside of the glass door. I looked at my father's crude map. The mill was another 2 miles down a road that was little more than a dirt track branching off the main route. There were no taxis, no Ubers, no friendly locals offering a ride. There was just me, my bag, and the long, quiet road. I started walking. The silence was unnerving at first. The main building was a great, sagging beast of weathered gray timber and rusted tin. Part of the roof had collapsed, leaving a jagged black hole open to the sky. Windows were shattered, dark mouths gaping. A massive, moss-covered water wheel was frozen on the side of the building, its paddles rotted through. The whole place leaned, as if tired of standing, tired of fighting gravity and time. It looked like it was being slowly swallowed by the land. My heart sank. This was it. This was my inheritance. A ruin. A pile of splinters and rust. Marcus could have it. $5,000 suddenly seemed generous. I stood there at the edge of the property, the heavy keys digging into my palm. I could turn around, walk back to the crossroads, and try to catch a bus going anywhere else. I could call Ms. Albright and tell her to take the deal. But my father had bought this place. He had kept it secret for 20 years. For me, there had to be a reason. Turning back now felt like a betrayal not just of him, but of that tiny, stubborn flicker of anger that had brought me all this way. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of decay and damp stone. I pushed through the rusted iron gate, its screech a protest against the intrusion. I was home. The front door was a massive slab of oak, swollen tight in its frame. The key, a long, skeletal piece of iron, refused to turn in the lock. It was rusted solid. I circled the building, my sneakers sinking into the soft, mossy ground. The air grew cooler as I moved into the long shadow of the mill. Around back, half hidden by a thicket of thorny bushes, was a smaller door, probably for loading. One of its hinges had rusted through, and it hung crookedly, leaving a gap just wide enough for me to squeeze through. The inside was cavernous and dark. The air was thick with the ghosts of old smells, the sweet, fermented tang of apples, the earthy scent of damp wood, the sharp metallic bite of rust. Shafts of dusty light cut through the holes in the roof, illuminating a world frozen in time. A huge, silent wooden press dominated the center of the main floor, a colossus of gears and screws. Conveyor belts snaked through the shadows, their rubber cracked and peeling. Barrels, some intact, some with their staves burst open, were stacked against the walls. Everything was draped in a thick, velvety blanket of cobwebs. It was overwhelming. The sheer scale of the neglect, the weight of the silence. This wasn't a project, it was an archaeological dig. I felt a fresh wave of despair wash over me. What was I thinking? I didn't have the skills, the money, or the strength to deal with this. I wasn't a pioneer. I was a 30-year-old woman whose primary life skills involved navigating urban brunch menus and placating a narcissistic husband. I wandered deeper into the gloom, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. In the back corner of the main pressing room, behind a stack of rotting pallets, was another door. This one was different. It was newer, made of solid steel, with a modern deadbolt lock. It looked completely out of place, an anachronism in this wooden tomb. I tried one of the other keys from the ring Ms. Albright had given me. It slid in smoothly. With a heavy clunk, the lock turned. The room inside was small, no bigger than a walk-in closet. But it was clean, dry. A single, bare bulb hung from a wire in the ceiling, and a light switch was next to the door. I flicked it on. Nothing happened. Of course, the power had been cut decades ago. I used the flashlight on my phone, its thin beam cutting through the darkness. The room was an office. A small, functional one. There was a simple wooden desk, a sturdy chair, and a heavy-duty metal filing cabinet. Unlike everything else in the mill, this space had been protected, cared for. My father's space. My breath caught in my throat. On the desk, placed squarely in the center, was a shoebox. Not an old, dusty one. A new one. Next to it was a single, sealed envelope with my name, Alara, written on it in his familiar, blocky handwriting. My hands were trembling as I picked it up. This was it. The reason. This was the voice I hadn't heard in 3 years, waiting for me in the dark. I sank into the chair, the wood cool against my skin. The silence of the mill pressed in, 1,000 forgotten moments holding their breath. I slid my finger under the flap and broke the seal. The letter was dated just 2 weeks before he died. My dearest Alara, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. It also means you've found your way here. I hope the journey wasn't too hard. I'm not good with words, you know that. Never have been. It's easier for me to fix a carburetor than to fix a sentence. But there are things you need to know, things I should have told you a long time ago. I had to stop reading, my eyes blurring with tears. I wiped them away with the back of my hand, angry at myself for crying. I took a shaky breath and continued. This place, this old ruin, isn't just some random piece of land. This is where our family started. Your great-grandfather, my grandfather, built this mill with his own 2 hands. His name was Samuel Vance. He was a farmer who believed you could make something beautiful and lasting from the earth. For 20 years, Vance and Son Ciders was the heart of this valley. Then the Depression hit. People didn't have money for cider when they could barely afford bread. He borrowed money to keep it going, to keep his workers employed. He borrowed it from the wrong people. They took everything. The mill, the farm, his pride. He died a broken man a year later. And my father, your grandfather, spent his whole life working in a factory in the city, trying to forget the smell of apples. I stared at the words, my mind struggling to connect this story with the silent, distant man I knew. He had never spoken of his family, of his past. It was a locked room, just like this one. I spent my entire adult life saving. The letter continued. Every extra dollar from every side job, every overtime shift. Not for a fancy house or a new car. For this. It took me until you were 10 years old, but I finally bought it back. It was a wreck even then, but it was ours. I kept it secret for 2 reasons. First, I was ashamed. Ashamed that all I could give you was a ruin, a ghost of what we'd lost. I always planned to fix it up, to make it something you could be proud of. But life, and my health, got in the way. The second reason was for you. I wanted you to have something that was yours alone. A place no one could touch. A foundation. I saw the way that boy, Marcus, looked at you. Not with love, Elara. With ambition. He looked at you like you were a beautiful thing he could own. I knew a man like that would try to own everything you had. I couldn't stop you from choosing him, but I could build you a lifeboat. A lifeboat. A great, sinking, rotten lifeboat. But it was mine. A sob escaped my lips, a raw, painful sound that echoed in the tiny room. I cried for the man I never really knew. I cried for the father who had seen the storm coming long before I ever felt the first drop of rain. And I cried for the foolish, naive girl who had mistaken a cage for a castle. After a long time, my tears subsided, leaving me feeling hollowed out and strangely calm. The grief was a clean, sharp pain, so different from the muddy, confusing sorrow of my divorce. This was a grief rooted in love. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the desk. My eyes fell on the shoebox. It was heavy. I lifted the lid. It was filled with cash. Neat bundles of 20s and 50s, held together with rubber bands. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than I'd seen in one place in my entire life. A quick count told me it was close to $50,000. Tucked in the bottom was a small, leather-bound ledger and another, smaller envelope. My phone buzzed, the sound violent in the stillness. I fumbled it out of my pocket. It was Ms. Albright. Elara? I'm so sorry to bother you, but I just got off the phone with Marcus's lawyer. He's rescinding the $5,000 offer. Good, I said, my voice steady. He's making a new one. He says he's found a surveyor's report from a few years ago indicating a high-yield aquifer under the property. The bottling rights alone could be worth a fortune to his development company. He's offering you $100,000, but it expires in 24 hours. After that, he's filing a suit to contest the deed transfer, claiming your father was not of sound mind. He's going to drag you through a legal battle that will cost you everything you don't have. $100,000. An hour ago, that number would have been a miracle, a fantasy. It was a ticket to a new life, a clean break, an escape from all of this. I could take it and disappear. Start over somewhere sunny and anonymous. No one would blame me. It was the logical choice. The safe choice. I looked at the cash in the box. At my father's handwriting. At the thick, silent walls of the mill around me. This place wasn't just a property. It wasn't just an asset with a fluctuating market value. It was a story. It was a legacy. It was the last piece of my father I had left. And Marcus wanted to pave it over and sell it in plastic bottles. Elara, are you there? Ms. Albright's voice was laced with concern. I took a deep breath. The air no longer smelled like decay. It smelled like apples. It smelled like home. Tell him no, I said. Tell him he can file his suit. But I'm not selling. Not for any price. Are you sure? She asked, the question heavy with the weight of consequence. He will make this ugly. Let him, I said, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt the solid ground beneath my feet. I'm not scared of him anymore. Hanging up the phone felt like closing a door on my old life. The finality of it was terrifying and exhilarating. There was no going back. No escape hatch. Just me, a ruined mill, and the ghost of a promise. For a moment, a wave of panic washed over me. What had I just done? I'd turned down a fortune, invited a legal war with a man who collected lawsuits like trophies, all for a pile of rotting wood and a box of cash that would evaporate in a legal fight. I sat there in the dark office, my phone's flashlight beam making the dust motes dance. I felt the familiar creep of self-doubt, the voice that Marcus had cultivated so carefully in my head for years, the one that told me I was foolish, incapable, and always in over my head. Listen, if you've ever had a voice like that in your own head, I want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just tell it to shut up for 1 minute, so you can hear your own heartbeat. And if this is hitting you right now, maybe take a second to hit that like button. It lets me know these stories are reaching the people who need them. I forced myself to stand up. Action. That was the antidote to fear. I couldn't fix the roof or fight a legal battle tonight, but I could do something. I walked out of the office, back into the cavernous main room of the mill. My phone's light was too small, too weak for the space. I remembered seeing old hurricane lamps on a shelf. I found one. its glass globe miraculously intact. I remembered the small can of kerosene in the office, something my father must have left for this very purpose. My hands, clumsy from years of city life, fumbled with the wick and the flint. But I got it lit. The flame flickered, then grew into a warm, steady golden glow. It pushed back the shadows, filling the cavernous space with a soft, living light. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was my light in my space. Armed with the lamp, I began to walk. I wasn't just looking anymore, I was seeing. I saw the massive oak beams, dark with age but still solid. I saw the craftsmanship in the mortise and tenon joints, fitted together without a single nail. This place wasn't just a ruin, it had bones. Good bones. My great-grandfather's hands had shaped this wood. My father's hope had preserved it. I found a broom with a handle worn smooth from use. It was probably my father's. I started in one corner of the main floor. The simple, repetitive motion of sweeping was meditative. With each stroke, I cleared away a layer of dust and grime, of neglect and forgetting. It was a small, almost pointless act in the face of so much decay, but it felt powerful. I wasn't just clearing a floor, I was staking a claim. This is mine. This is where I stand. I worked for hours, fueled by a strange energy. The physical labor was a balm. It was honest. You push the broom, the floor gets cleaner. There was no subtext, no manipulation, no gaslighting. Just effort and result. My muscles, soft from a life of inactivity, began to ache. Sweat traced paths through the dust on my face, and I felt more alive than I had in a decade. As I cleared a section near the great press, the broom head caught on an uneven floorboard. I knelt, running my hand over the wood. It was loose. Using the claw end of a hammer I'd found in a rusted toolbox, I pried it up. Underneath was a small, hollow space, and nestled inside was a metal box, the kind used for deeds and important papers. It was heavier than the shoebox. I carried it back to the office, my heart pounding a rhythm of anticipation and fear. What else had he left for me? I set it on the desk next to the first letter. The box wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were no bundles of cash. There were documents. Old, brittle deeds with elegant, spidery script. Survey maps, geological reports, and dozens of notebooks, the kind my father always carried, filled with his dense, mechanical scrawl. At the very top was another envelope, this one thicker than the first. Part 2, it said. I opened it, my hand steadier now. Alara, the letter began. If you found the money, you have a choice. You can take it and run. I will not blame you. That money is your escape, your fresh start, if that's what you need. I pray you don't. I pray you stayed. Because the money is not the real inheritance. This mill is. And it is more than it seems. My eyes scanned the page, my mind racing to keep up. The aquifer Marcus's people found? It's real. But it's not for bottling. The water is unique. It has a mineral composition that is almost identical to the water from a specific region in Normandy, France, famous for its apple brandy, its Calvados. I had it tested years ago. The report is in this box. Our apples, Alara, the ones great-grandfather Samuel planted. They're not eating apples. They are bitter, acidic, heirloom cider varietals, worthless for anything else. But for making cider, for making brandy, they are gold. There are still a dozen of the old trees alive in the overgrown orchard behind the mill. They are tough, resilient things. Like our family. He went on to explain his plan. He had spent years researching. He'd taught himself the chemistry of distillation, the art of coopering, the science of grafting heirloom apple trees. The notebooks were filled with his research. His dream wasn't just to reclaim the mill, but to make it live again. Not just as it was, but as something better. A small batch, artisanal distillery. A place of pride, of craft, of independence. The money I left you is seed money, he wrote. It's enough to get the power on, to fix the worst of the roof, to buy a small, modern still. It's enough to survive the first year. It's not enough to make you rich. It's enough to give you work. Meaningful work. Your work. This place can be your fortress, Alara. A business and a home that you build with your own hands. Something no one can ever take from you. The final paragraph shattered me. I know I was not a warm man. My own father taught me that love was a weakness the world would exploit. He was wrong. His silence didn't protect him. It just left him alone. I am sorry I passed that silence on to you. I see you. I see your strength, the strength you don't even know you have. The fire in you that man has tried so hard to extinguish. Let this place be the bellows that brings it back to a roar. Don't let him win. Don't let the ghosts of broken men win. Build something, Elara. For me. For your great-grandfather. But most of all, for you. Your loving father. I laid the letter down, the paper stained with my tears. The weight of his love, a secret he had carried for 2 decades, settled over me. It wasn't a burden. It was armor. He hadn't just given me a lifeboat. He had given me a map, a compass, and a reason to sail. Marcus didn't just want to take a piece of land from me. He wanted to steal my father's dream, my great-grandfather's legacy, and my one chance at building a life that mattered. The fight was no longer just about me. The next morning, I woke up stiff and sore on a pile of old grain sacks in the office, the kerosene lamp having long since burned out. The gray morning light filtered through the dusty windows. For the first time, looking out at the dilapidated mill, I didn't see a ruin. I saw potential. I saw work. I saw a future. My first call was to Ms. Albright. I told her everything. About the letters, the cash, the notebooks, the geological reports. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My God," she finally said, her professional calm completely gone, replaced by something that sounded like awe. "Your father, he was a remarkable man." "Yes, he was," I said, my voice thick. "This changes everything, Elara. This isn't just a nuisance lawsuit for Marcus anymore. This is a multi-million-dollar proposition he's trying to steal. His claim that your father was of unsound mind is their only angle. We need to prove he was meticulous, planned, and entirely competent. These notebooks, these reports, they are our proof. They're a roadmap of a perfectly sound, brilliant mind at work." She laid out the plan. We would use a portion of the cash as a retainer for her and to hire a specialist in property and water rights law. We would file a countersuit against Marcus for frivolous litigation and harassment. We would get a restraining order to keep him and his surveyors off my property. "He's a bully, Elara," she said, her voice hard as steel now. "And the one thing bullies can't stand is a fight they might actually lose. We're going to make this so expensive and so public for him that he'll have no choice but to walk away." For the first time, the legal battle didn't seem like a terrifying monster in the dark. It seemed like a problem to be solved, a carburetor to be fixed. After the call, I went to work. I spent the next week in a fever of activity. I found a hardware store in the next town over and bought cleaning supplies, heavy-duty trash bags, work gloves, and a new battery for an old portable radio I found in the office. I dragged rotting barrels out into the sun. I shoveled out layers of debris and filth. I scrubbed floors. I pulled weeds until my hands were raw. One afternoon, an old pickup truck rumbled down the lane and stopped. An elderly man with a face like a weathered map and hands like gnarled oak roots got out. He watched me for a moment as I wrestled with a stubborn, thorny vine that was trying to pull the siding off the wall. "You're making a racket," he said. His voice was a low grumble. "Sorry to disturb you," I said, not stopping. "Didn't say I minded," he grunted. He walked closer, his eyes scanning the building. This was the old Vance place. Ain't seen nobody here in 50 years. Thought it was gone for good. "I'm a Vance," I said. "Elara. It's mine now." He squinted at me. "You're Tom Vance's girl? The mechanic from the city?" I was stunned. "You knew my father?" "Knew of him," the man corrected. "He'd come up here a couple times a year. Quiet fella. Drove out. Looked at the place for an hour. Drove off. Always thought it was strange. Name's George. My farm is just over that ridge." He nodded toward the east. "He ever tell you about the trees? The apple trees?" "Yes, he did." George nodded slowly. "Your great-granddaddy, Samuel. He planted the best orchard in this valley. Everybody else planted Red Delicious and Granny Smith. Easy sellers. He planted things nobody had ever heard of. Kingston Black, Dabinet, Foxwhelp. Said they made a cider that could make an angel weep." He looked at me, a flicker of something in his pale blue eyes. "Most of them are gone now, but the ones that are left, they're survivors." He told me he had a nephew who was a builder. He told me the town's part-time electrical inspector owed him a favor. He told me where to find the wellhead and how to check if the pump was seized. He didn't offer help, not directly, but he gave me information. He gave me a connection, a thread to the community I didn't know I had. Before he left, he looked at the pile of debris I had collected. "You'll need a truck to haul that to the dump," he said. "I know. It's on my list. He just grunted again and drove off. The next morning, his nephew, a quiet man in his 40s named Ben, showed up with a flatbed truck. He didn't say much. He just helped me load it up and hauled it all away. When he came back, he had a thermos of coffee and 2 mugs. We sat on the tailgate and drank in silence for a while. "Uncle George says you're Tom's girl," he said finally. "I am. He was a good man. Came and fixed my generator once during a winter storm. Didn't charge me a dime. Just asked me to keep an eye on this place for him." Ben looked at the sagging roof. "That's a big job." "I know," I said. "I can give you a fair price," he said. "And I know some guys. We can start next week." It was that simple. A kindness returned. A community quietly closing ranks around one of its own. These were the things Marcus, with all his money and power, could never understand. He bought loyalty. He couldn't earn it. The legal battle raged on for months, a distant war fought through paperwork and angry phone calls by Ms. Albright. Marcus's lawyers filed motion after motion. They tried to depose me. They sent private investigators to dig up dirt on my father, on me. They were throwing everything they had at the wall, hoping something would stick. But with every document from my father's box, with every notebook entry detailing his meticulous research, their case grew weaker. My father's secret plan, his quiet diligence, was my shield. Meanwhile, at the mill, life was returning. Ben and his crew were true to their word. They started on the roof, their hammers echoing through the valley, a sound of reconstruction, of hope. I used my father's notes to find the old apple trees in the overgrown orchard. I spent weeks carefully pruning them, clearing away the choking weeds, giving them air and light. They were gnarled and scarred, but they were alive. I found new buds on their branches. I enrolled in an online course on fermentation science. I read every book I could find on distilling. I spent my nights in the small office, poring over my father's notebooks, deciphering his handwriting, feeling like his student, his partner. The place was slowly transforming from a ruin into a home, a workshop, a future, and I was transforming with it. The brittle, scared woman from the motel room was being replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone with calloused hands and a quiet confidence in her eyes. The final blow to Marcus's case came from an unexpected place. George, my neighbor, remembered something. He remembered my father hiring him one summer about 5 years back to help clear a blocked culvert on the edge of the property. He'd paid George with a personal check, a check from his own account, for work done on the property held by the trust. Ms. Albright called it the silver bullet. It was irrefutable proof of his ongoing, sound-minded engagement with and investment in the property. It was commingling, but in the opposite direction, tying his personal, competent self directly to the secret trust. A week later, Marcus's lawyer called Ms. Albright. They were dropping the suit. There was no offer, no settlement, just a quiet, bitter retreat. It was over. I had won. Or rather, my father had. He had won the war for me 20 years before it ever started. I got the news while I was standing on a ladder, painting the frame of a newly installed window. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I just leaned my head against the cool glass and closed my eyes, a profound sense of peace settling over me. The silence that followed was not the absence of noise. It was the presence of tranquility. A year has passed since that day. The mill is no longer a ruin. The new roof is on. The windows are glazed. The great water well has been restored. It doesn't power the mill anymore, but it turns a slow, steady heartbeat for the whole valley. Inside, where the giant press once stood, sits a beautiful, gleaming copper still, imported from Portugal. My father would have loved it. I named my first batch of cider Vance's Folly. It sold out at the local farmer's market in 2 hours. The first bottles of apple brandy are aging now in oak barrels in the cool, dark cellar. It will be 2 more years before it's ready. I have time. I have work. I have a home. I never heard from Marcus again. I sometimes see his company's ads, selling sterile condos with names like The Pines or River's Edge. They promise a lifestyle of luxury and ease. But they look like the beige motel room to me. Empty boxes with a nice view. My inheritance wasn't the money or the land. It was the discovery that the things that are truly valuable are the things that are built, not bought. It's the strength you find when you have nothing left to lose. It's the love that's quiet and steady in plans for a storm you can't yet see. My father gave me more than a mill. He gave me back myself. He knew that the greatest freedom isn't having everything you want, but wanting the one thing you have. This place, this story, it's my foundation. And I'm just getting started. So what about you? What's the inheritance that you've been given that isn't about money? Maybe it's a story from a grandparent, a skill from a parent, a quiet resilience you didn't know you had. I want you to share it in the comments below. I read every single one because I believe our stories are the foundations we build our lives on. And if this story meant something to you, if it gave you a little bit of hope, consider subscribing. We're building a community here, a place for people who know that sometimes you have to go through the ruins to find your way home. Thank you for listening.
Like, what else do we put in our home? Okay, excuse you. No, move. Get out of my way, please. I need you to understand I haven't beat her once. I haven't won the competition in Expanded yet. It's so hard. Okay, wait. Do we have a picture that we can print that off of? Okay, I think we have to make a quick pit stop. Because we can go to the developer island that they gave us, you know? And I can go get a picture of that gaming desk. OMG, the Pikachu picture. The Pikachu picture is great. Okay. So yeah, we're gonna go back to that island that the Pokemon Company put out the code for. I just need to find where they put that code. Ah, here it is. PXQC G0 3S. Thank you for the wisdom drop. I will be doing that. I always forget to put out the milk and cookies for Santa, Ellie. Okay. The only problem is now we have to figure out which house it's in. I guess we'll start over here. Why are some of your letters censored? Why can you